Story 1. The Bitter Taste of Trust. I was 25 years old and living in a city where the silence of my apartment felt heavier as Valentine's Day approached. I told myself I didn't care, that it was just a commercial holiday, but every advertisement and social media post seemed designed to remind me of my own isolation. In a moment of vulnerability, I opened Tinder, hoping to find anyone who could help me avoid spending that night alone. That's when I matched with Sam or Samantha. We talked on the phone for weeks, and she seemed perfect. She was intelligent, funny, and we seemed to have a genuine connection. When I finally suggested we meet at a public bar for our first date, Sam had a different idea. She pointed out that I lived alone and suggested we just have drinks at my place to keep things intimate. A red flag went off in the back of my mind. Why would a woman feel so comfortable coming directly to a stranger's house? But my desperation for company silenced my survival instinct, and I agreed. She arrived at 7 p.m. When she took off her jacket, her outfit was far more revealing than I expected for a first meeting. We started with wine, but Sam quickly pushed for something stronger. She sat uncomfortably close on the couch, never breaking eye contact, touching my shoulder in a way that felt more like a predator marking prey than a woman flirting. After dinner, she proposed a game. We would each go into the kitchen and make a mystery drink for the other, while the recipient waited in a different room. I went first, mixing a terrible concoction of gin and soda. When it was my turn to drink hers, I noticed an awful, metallic, bitter taste that I couldn't identify. Within minutes, my world began to tilt. My motor functions evaporated. My vision blurred into a gray haze, and a terrifying weight settled into my limbs. I managed to tell her she had to leave, but as I tried to crawl toward my bed, I realized I couldn't move my legs. I fell onto the mattress, completely paralyzed but fully conscious. I had a deep, primal fear that I was going to stop breathing. Then I heard the door click. Sam walked back into the room. Her friendly face was gone, replaced by a cold, hollow expression of pure malice. She pulled a small pocket knife from her bag and pressed the blade against my cheek. She whispered that she could kill me right then if she wanted to. I watched, helpless, as she began to systematically ransack my apartment, taking thousands of dollars worth of electronics and personal items. I woke up the next morning to a hollowed-out home. The police told me her profile, her name, and her job were all complete fabrications. She was a ghost who had used my loneliness as a doorway. Today, I live with a constant hypervigilance, knowing that some people don't look for love on these apps, they look for victims. Story 2. The Ritual of Gothica. The second story comes from a time when I felt invisible to the world. I matched with a girl who went by the name Gothica. Her photos were striking, dark hair, sharp eyeliner, and a calm, unreadable expression. We decided to meet at a movie theater for our first date. During the film, the atmosphere shifted from awkward to unsettling. She didn't watch the screen. She spent most of the time staring directly at me in the darkness. She would lean in and whisper questions that had nothing to do with the movie, asking if I liked being alone or if I ever felt invisible. She laughed during the most tragic scenes and remained stone-faced during the comedies. Despite the growing knot in my stomach, I invited her back to my place for a drink. Once inside, her behavior became even more invasive. She wandered through my rooms without asking, running her fingers along the walls as if she were sensing something I couldn't see. She asked how many other women had been in my bed and said, "I don't like men who recycle memories." We eventually moved to the bedroom. She looked at me with a sudden, sharp intensity and commanded, "Turn off all the lights." I hesitated, trying to make a joke about it being like a horror movie, but she didn't smile. When the room plunged into total darkness, the silence felt thick and suffocating. Suddenly, a violent force grabbed my hair. I felt a blinding explosion of pain as she used superhuman strength to tear a clump of hair directly from my scalp. I screamed and fumbled for the light. When the bulb flickered on, I saw her sitting upright on the bed, her eyes rolled so far back that only the whites were showing. Her mouth was moving in a rapid, rhythmic whisper, not a language, but a ritual. "I have you now," she shrieked in a voice that sounded like two people speaking at once. I control you for the rest of your life. I scrambled for my phone and called 911 while she rocked back and forth, chanting through her screams. When the sirens finally echoed in the street, Gothica didn't panic. She focused. She leapt off the bed with unnatural speed, threw open the window, and jumped into the night. I ran to the window and saw her hit the grass below. She stood up, looked up at me with a wide, distorted grin, and vanished into the shadows. The police found no trace of her. Her profile vanished as if it never existed. A week later, I was walking home when I heard a sing-song voice call my name from behind a tree. I turned and saw her that same wide, impossible grin before she disappeared again. I still don't know if she was real or if she found a way to stay inside my head forever. Story 3. The coordination of Jeremy and Alex. The final story is a reminder that the person you think you're talking to might just be the lure for something much worse. A young woman was seeing a man named Jeremy whom she had met on Hinge. After 2 normal dates, they planned a 3rd meeting at a downtown cafe. She arrived 30 minutes early to get settled. Jeremy didn't show up on time. After an hour of silence and no replies to her texts, she realized she had been stood up. That was when another man who introduced himself as Alex approached her table. Alex was overly confident. He claimed he'd been watching her and could tell she had been stood up. He offered to buy her a drink at a bar down the street to cheer her up. But then he said something that made her blood turn to ice. He suggested the exact same secondary location that she and Jeremy had discussed in their private messages. She realized in an instant that this wasn't a coincidence. Jeremy and Alex were working together. She remained calm, ordered an Uber, and fled the cafe immediately, blocking Jeremy on everything. She thought she was safe once she reached her apartment. But 20 minutes later, there was a violent pounding on her door. It was Jeremy, screaming that there had been a misunderstanding and demanding she open the door. She used her safety chain and opened the door just a few inches to tell him to leave. That's when Alex stepped out of the shadows of the hallway. He wasn't carrying a drink. He was carrying industrial bolt cutters. Before she could react, Alex thrust the tool into the gap and snapped her security chain like a dry twig. Jeremy began throwing his shoulder against the door to force his way in. By pure adrenaline-fueled instinct, she jammed her bare foot under the door to create leverage, shoved with all her weight, and managed to throw the deadbolt just as the door was about to give way. The men stayed outside for several minutes, shouting threats before finally disappearing into the night. She was left with a bloody gash on her foot and a shattered sense of security. She realized that Jeremy hadn't been interested in a date. He had spent 2 weeks building a fantasy just to gain her trust so he and his partner could erase her. Final reflection. These stories serve as a chilling reminder that in the modern world, danger doesn't always come with a mask and a weapon in a dark alley. Sometimes, the most dangerous people are the ones who have the patience to build a fantasy until reality becomes an inconvenience they feel entitled to destroy. Trust your gut. It's the only thing that doesn't need an app to keep you safe.